Do 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 do. Joe and Mr. Greg.
Hi guys, so today we're going to be talking about something called value. Value is basically how hard you push on your pencil. You can see I push hard here, pushing light here, pushing somewhere in between here. And with that being said, I can use different pressure to get things like shadow and add shading to my shapes to create what are called forms. Over here, you can see that I have all kinds of shadow or value. Um, I have a very light and a very dark square, and somewhere in between, I have the midtones. Now, today, you guys are going to be practicing using a value scale, 6-step value scale, and you're also going to be doing something where you work on forms. The forms that I'm going to have you guys do are a sphere, a cube, and a cylinder. We're going to leave the cone out of your drawing. You're going to just need a pencil and a piece of paper for this. It should be pretty easy, but it could be sloppy too if you're not paying attention to how well you're drawing. So please take your time and do your best. I'll show you some new tricks. So after you get your understanding of what value is, basically, again, the value is just how dark a certain shape becomes after pressing harder on your pencil or using a darker paint or whatever. Value just basically saying how dark something is. We are going to start with a value scale up here. And I don't have a ruler handy, but I do have this little box that would work fine for me to get a nice straight line. So I'm going to go ahead and use it to help me draw my value box. It's not a value menu or something you would get at a fast food place. No, this is about dark and light. Now, I said that there would be 6 steps, so we got to start with 1 here, and to make sure that they center and the 6 doesn't end up here, I'm going to put the 6 down here, and then I'm going to put a 2 and a 5, and then I'm going to, since I have lots of room here, I'm going to spread out my 3 and my 4. That's a neat trick on centering things, right? You start with the ends and work your way to the middle. So here we go. I'm going to put in my lines, and 1 will be the lightest, 6 will be the darkest. Let's go back to that value scale that I had and try to use it to help us understand which colors we want. Personally, I like to start with either the darkest or the lightest and work my way across. That way I can see what I need to do to change each one to make sure that it's not just light and all dark. Some kids press so hard on their middle that they can't ever get dark enough on their last one. So I'm going to press pretty hard here, and you can use what is called hatching lines. Hatching lines are ones that go straight up and down, and then you can use what are called cross-hatching lines, which are ones that cross over them, sort of like a tic-tac-toe, but really, really close lines, and you can do little scribbles over top of it to get your dark darks. Okay, that's about as dark as I can get with this type of pencil. This is not a drawing pencil as much as it's just a writing pencil. Now, again, I'm going to start with hatching lines, and you can see the big difference here. This is number 5 is not dark enough, so I'm going to go back over pressing a little harder this time, but not too hard. And you want to try your best to stay inside of the lines, stay inside of your box. Okay, and you just want to work your way up until it's almost the same color as 6, but a little bit lighter. This will take practice and it'll take time. Your parents will probably look at you and say, well, what are you doing over there? You're going through a whole pencil tip trying to get that color. But they'll understand when you get better and better at shading your artwork that this type of practice is what you need to get good at art. Okay, so I'm going on to number 4. Again, number 4 is quite a bit lighter than 5. And I'm using long, and if you have to rotate your paper a little bit, that's fine. Anyways, what I was saying is I'm using long shading strokes. It is getting lighter as it goes. Number 3, it's got to even be lighter. It's almost like I have to tickle the paper. Here's something I always tell kids. If you can tickle your hand, you can make it so light that it kind of tickles on your hand. And you can do that same pressure on paper. Get really light lines. Okay? And again, if it's starting to look like one is darker than the other, you can go back in and work your way across. It's a challenge. There's no doubt about it. This is not easy. A boy or a girl your age should be able to at least give it a shot. Okay, number 2. The further back I hold, the lighter I can draw. Oh, it's so much easier to go light when you're holding back. Now, you probably can't even see that I drew on that, but I promise I did. It is on there. Oh, that looks pretty good. Now, I got out of the lines a little bit. You can always come back and erase if you have to, but don't get too worried about that stuff. Number 1. Oh my gosh, I finally made it. I'm gonna go ahead in there and just shade it neatly without making too big of a fuss. All right, giving myself a little criticism. This is dark, looking good. It seems like these 3 are almost all the same. So it seems like maybe I could go a little darker on 4, bring 3 up a little bit, and bring 2 up a little bit. Well, these are all steps that you'll take to get better at art and better at shading. The next thing I'll have you do is draw your cylinder, your sphere, and your cube. Okay, so cube, cylinder, and sphere. We'll get to that next. But I want you to try this. Try this. It's called a value scale. So spend a minute, spend 10 minutes, spend as long as you need, and get that 6-step value scale. You're going to take a picture of it and include it on your Google Classroom. So you can see I've already drawn my circle, and all I did was use a cup to trace. Now, drawing the cube. Over here you can see there is almost like a diamond shape or a parallelogram, and then there's a square and another parallelogram or diamond shape on the side. As far as the cylinder goes, it's just a vertical, another vertical, and an oval on top and bottom. So here I'm going to want to draw it as well as I can using the one on the right as reference. So I know that this overlaps, so I'm going to put my corner of my box here. And if you want to use a ruler, you can. It doesn't have to be perfect, though. Okay? It's good to look off of things like we did in previous lessons to get better at drawing. So you look at things, you draw what you see, and it helps your imagination when you're drawing things from your own head uh, to get more ideas, not only about shape, but in this case, about shading and how you would put it together. So, is mine perfect? Not really, but it'll be great for shading. So this will be the darkest, this will be medium, and this will be lightest. Okay, as far as the ball or the sphere goes, the darkest areas will be here and underneath. And let's move on to that cylinder. You can see the cylinder is not over here all by itself. It's behind the cube, so I'm going to draw a line up. And again, if you want to use a ruler for this, you may draw a line up. Try to keep it as neat as you can. And then we're going to draw in a little curve because the bottom of it does have a curve to it. And the top of it has a curve to it. So we're going to curve around and keep that curve going and come back. Okay, now shading is difficult, as you saw on the one that I showed you earlier with the value scale. This is what you're going to want to concentrate on: how hard you press, where your darkest darks are. So as you can see, the darkest darks are underneath where it's touching the ground, and a lot of shadows. One thing you want to watch out for is if your hand is dragging, it will smudge along with it. So be careful and make sure you're shading in the direction of the object. Notice I'm shading with the curve of the ball. And again, this is just practice. So if yours turns out great, awesome. If it doesn't turn out great, at least you gave it a shot and tried something new. That's the cool thing about art. You really get to experience things you'd never get to experience in any other part of your life. Doing stuff like this, really fun, and it's not hurting anybody if you do badly on it. And if you do good on it, you'll feel really proud of yourself, and you'll want to hold on to it and keep it. So you can see I'm using sort of a scribbling technique. Since it's a rounded object, I'm kind of scribbling it. Okay. Rounded things have more of a scribble to them. Straight things have more of a, one word that we talked about earlier, hatching. There's more of a hatching. Well, I just keep going back over the same spaces until it gets as dark as I need it to get. And I can move on to my next shape, maybe come back to him later. There is a couple lines in here that I'm going to want to erase. Now be careful, erasing too much is a problem with art, especially with pencil. If you erase a lot, you'll find the next time you go over that same spot, no matter how lightly you press, it becomes very dark all of a sudden. So be careful. You'll find that out the more you use pencil. Okay, you can see I'm going in on the top and shading, and I'm pressing kind of hard, so that means the front of the box is gonna be quite a bit darker if I want to match the picture. So I can use hatching or cross hatching to shade it. Notice I changed the direction of my shading. I want to make it look pretty smooth. That box doesn't have a whole bunch of dark darks right beside the mediums and all that. There's not a lot of texture to it. It's a pretty smooth shape. So I used a cross hatching technique, and now I'm going and kind of smoothing it all out with a diagonal hatching. Hatching sounds like something a bird would do, but it's just a term in drawing we use for using your pencil. You can hatch with a pen too. Drawing materials. Alright, so you don't want it to look too smudgy, but some kids will decide to use their finger to try to smudge all their color together. Just be aware that once your finger gets real dirty, you may end up making your areas that are supposed to be mid-tones very dark way too soon. So I tend to stay away from the smudging technique. All right, it's hard for me because I keep looking away from my drawing to look over at the computer screen, which is, see, my computer is actually right here. And so I kind of have to look to my right and then look down to draw, and it's a little difficult because I am looking at that reference or looking at the picture of the ball and of the cylinder and the cube, just like you guys will look at either my drawing or look at the both of them. Look at my hand working and look at the reference. That's what we call something you look at while you draw, a reference. Okay, I'm going to go in and make that dark for where the ball is hitting the ground. I give it a little shadow there. Again, this is all just practice. You just give it a shot. Everybody's is going to be, the way theirs turns out will be a little bit different than your friends. And that's okay. Nobody's perfect. So here's a hint I can give you. If you squint at your drawing and then squint at the picture, sometimes that gives you the answer and tells you if you're going dark enough. Okay? See that drop shadow, where that shadow fades as it goes away from the shape. All right, last one, cylinder. I'm going to start with the top, which is a mid-tone, very light on the value scale, doesn't have much color to it. And then I'm going to go to my side, which is over here. This is the darkest area. And maybe I would rotate my paper. But again, I'm using long lines, trying to get it as neat as I can. And this is a challenge for sure. It's kind of big. Drawing smaller makes it a heck of a lot easier to control what your fingers are doing. So if you're a kid watching this and having trouble and you're feeling like starting over, maybe you can draw it a little smaller the second time. Be easier to control what your fingers are doing. Okay, again, I'm using hatching lines and then controlled scribbles. Some people, at least where I grew up, we called controlled scribbles scumbling. Now, I'm not sure if that's the proper term. That might have just been some of the people I hung out with and learned from. Maybe that's what they called it, because I haven't really met too many artists that call it that, but we called it scumbling with the scribble. Okay, so that is a nice look so far. Again, I'm going to put in my drop shadow. Drop shadow is just a fancy word for what happens when the light crosses over a shape, creates form, and so the light in this case would be, coming from this direction, or maybe straight across. But again, you don't have to worry too much about the background. Just show me the sphere, the cube, the cylinder, and and the value scale. Okay, so those two drawings should take you actually quite a bit of time, believe it or not. And if you do it well, you'll be very, very happy that you did. Next week, we'll be getting into doing some more exciting things like drawing actual items. Okay? Looking forward to seeing your design on Google Classroom. Stay safe, stay happy.